Good afternoon. My name is Kevin Arnold, and I am the host of Focus on San Francisco. I got with me today Mr. John Artntz. Is it Ernst?
Artntz.
Ernst, who is the election director of the San Francisco Elections Department. Mr. Artntz, how are you doing?
Very well, thank you, Kevin.
We'd like to thank you for being on Focus on San Francisco today.
Oh, you're welcome. I appreciate you stopping by today.
Hello, John. How are you doing?
Good, Kevin. Thank you. How are you doing?
Thank you for giving us the opportunity to come here and be in your office. You are director of elections in San Francisco. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, how long have you been been the director here?
I've been the director of elections for 16 years, just over 16 years. I've been with the department for 19 years.
Okay. Now, what made you get involved in that you wanted to work with voting and elections?
Well, like a lot of people, I didn't end up here on purpose. I was new to the area in 1999, and I was looking for work, and the elections department was hiring temporary positions, actually.
Okay.
And I applied for a temporary position at the front desk, where it was during the Willie Brown, Tom Amiano mayor's election in October 1999. And I was thrown right into elections from the beginning. It was a very well-attended election. And from there, I ended up staying with the department and working various roles. I moved to the voter registration area, the voter services division. I moved then to what's called our ballot distribution division, where I was the one who was responsible for securing the vote-by-mail ballots and getting those mailed, and also getting the ballots for the polling places and get everything counted. And then I moved into like an operations manager role, where I was in charge of the warehouse. I was in charge of the registration and the ballot distribution. And then in 2002, I ended up being the acting director. And then after that, I think 2004, I became the full-time director. So I moved through the department like many people have who joined the elections department. And it's true, I think, also in the elections field, a lot of people, they end up in elections. They didn't really plan to be in elections, but once they get there, they realize that they like it. The people who work elections have the ability, the aptitude to work in elections. It's not for everyone. It can be very stressful work. It requires a lot of overtime during the election cycle, and there's a lot of demands that are placed on people's time and attention and energy every election cycle. So, but a lot of folks like myself, we get involved in it. We move to different areas of the operation. We enjoy it. We gain responsibility, and we end up making careers out of it. And that's my situation.
Boy, it seems like you wearing a lot of hats in this department.
Yeah,
now, John, when you talk about voter and elections, are we talking about two separate things? Are we talking about voting and elections, or is they considered just one umbrella?
It can be. Voting certainly is. I mean, voting is a component of elections, but there's a lot of process and law just around the formation of implementing elections. But then there's the act of voting, and the act of voting is a part of elections. And I think for a lot of people, it's the voting is the election. And so when people think of the Department of Elections, they think about voting. And I think also when people consider what the department does, they don't realize there's so much more that goes into allowing someone to vote, to give them the option to vote, and that's the elections part of it. And that's what we spend a lot of time doing, is getting everything in place, getting the materials and getting the information, and getting the support together so people can vote.
Okay. Now, what are the requirements that a person has to meet in order to be a registered voter? Is there certain things that they have to be in order to be able to register to vote?
Yeah, so to be a registered voter, one has to be 18 years of age, not in prison, not on parole or convicted of a felony, not deemed mentally incompetent by a court, and live in San Francisco. And so there's not a lot of criteria that one has to meet to be a voter. So essentially, for most folks, if they're 18 and they live in San Francisco, then more times than not, they're able to register and vote.
Now, what about a person who is committed a crime, a felony crime? They've completed their sentence. Are they able to get their voting rights reinstated?
They do. If there's any parole involved with that sentence, then they have to wait for the parole to end.
Okay.
Yeah, but once the parole period terminates, Then in California, anyone convicted of a felony who served time for a felony is off parole. Automatically, they become eligible to register to vote.
Okay, so let's talk about different types of voting because there's different kinds of voting. Let's first talk about absentee voting. Explain to me what absentee voting is, so a person to know if I want to do an absentee ballot, what is required by that?
Well, it's called vote by mail voting now.
Okay.
So it's changed just within the last few years.
Okay.
So vote by mail voting is the department sends you a ballot for that election.
Okay.
And there's two types of vote by mail voting. There's vote by mail voting just for an election.
Okay.
So people can receive a ballot just for an election and then go to the polls afterwards. There's also what's called permanent vote by mail voting.
Okay.
And permanent vote by mail voting is the department will mail you a ballot before every election.
Okay.
So there's no need to apply every election to receive a ballot in the mail.
Okay.
And we have around 300,000 permanent vote by mail voters in San Francisco.
Okay.
And we have just under 500,000 registered voters total.
Okay.
So 3/5 essentially of the voters in San Francisco, every election have a ballot mailed to them by the department.
Okay.
And then there's voting at the polls.
Okay.
And so, and in California, there's precincts, and precincts are defined by no more than 1,000 registered voters per precinct. So we have over 590 precincts in San Francisco, and there's 587 voting precincts in San Francisco.
Okay.
And they're no larger than 1,000 people, and we try to set polling places up for each precinct where it's within 8 blocks where everyone lives in that precinct in that area of town. Everyone who lives in that precinct can go to that polling place, so their names are printed on a roster. The voters announce their names to the poll workers at that polling place. The voters will have them sign the roster, and then the voters will give them the ballot, and they make their marks on the ballot. At the polls, what's different is that people actually have their ballots tabulated by the equipment at the polling place, whereas the vote by mail, the ballots are sent back to the department here at City Hall, and then we tabulate here. So the voter's not present when the ballots are tabulated when you're voting by mail, whereas you're voting at the polling places, you can watch your ballot be tabulated.
Okay. Now let's talk about a newer concept. They got something they call voting centers now. Does San Francisco have any voting centers? And tell our audience what a voting center is.
So we do have a voting center in San Francisco. And every election we've had for decades.
Okay.
It's been 30 years probably.
Okay.
We've had a voting center in San Francisco, and it's here at City Hall. And so every person who's a registered voter in San Francisco can vote here at City Hall every election.
Okay.
And the voting center here at City Hall opens 29 days before every election. If Indigenous Peoples Day is the Monday, 29 days before election, then it would be the next day on Tuesday.
Okay.
So this election, it would actually be on the Tuesday, which is 28 days. And then we're open the 2 weekends before election day from 10 to 4. And then on election day, the City Hall becomes a polling place. It's open from 7 to 8 p.m.
Okay.
Now in California, there's been a big change because there's voting centers in 5 counties right now in California. They call them vote centers. And the difference is, instead of having polling places, every person in that county is mailed a ballot automatically. So there's no need for people to be permanent vote by mail voters or to request a vote by mail voter, because the county automatically mails a ballot to every voter in that county. But there's no more polling places.
Okay.
So the law requires that the county set up what's called vote centers, one for every 10,000 registered voters.
Okay.
So in San Francisco, if we were to move to vote centers, we would have 50 vote centers because there's 500,000 registered voters, so every 10,000 they make it 50. And so these vote centers allow everyone in the county to go and vote. So it's not like a polling place where ideally if you live in that precinct, you go to that precinct's polling place. With vote centers, you go to any vote center in the county and cast your ballot.
Okay.
So it's different. So the vote center actually becomes a vote by mail election with some vote centers, whereas with San Francisco, we're still a polling place based election with the opportunity and the option to vote by mail. So there are some differences.
Now, what if the voter needs to get in contact with your office? Is there a website that they can go to? Would you be able to share that with our audience to tell them if you don't have information and you have computer access? Mm-hmm. Is there a certain website they can go and get information?
Yeah, our website's a fantastic source of information. Okay. I mean, we put a lot of energy in putting content and information on the website, and the address is sfelections.org.
Okay.
And so if people plug in sfelections.org, they'll bring up our site.
Okay.
And then also during the election cycle, we have a phone bank of people that we hire and we train to respond to voters' questions.
Okay.
So if people call our main number, which is 554-4375, then they can speak to a live person during the election cycle and answer most questions. So our website, sfelections.org. And then our main number at 554-4375.
Okay. Now, there's been some issues about ranked choice voting. Could you explain to our audience what is ranked choice voting? Because in the last mayor's election, there was some issues where two of the candidates were saying, vote for me 1 and vote for me 2. And it created some issues when that last year. So what is ranked choice voting?
So ranked choice voting provides people the opportunity to vote for more than one candidate in a contest.
Okay.
And the idea is that people can choose who's their favorite candidate.
Okay.
Give that person the number 1 vote. And then whoever the voter believes is their second favorite candidate, to give that second candidate the second favorite vote. And right now in San Francisco, there's 3 rankings. There's 3 choices per contest. So first, second, and third. Okay. And so what you saw last election, where it was people were selecting their primary candidate first, and then a secondary candidate second, and then a third candidate third. With the way the ranked choice voting method operates is that the candidates who receive the least amount of votes, they get what's called eliminated from the contest. Okay. So then so for those ballot cards that have that candidate that's been eliminated, the voting system looks to the voters who picked that candidate eliminated to the second choice, and then they bring that second choice into the count. Okay. And so then then the system retallies everything, recounts all the votes. Then that's what the system does. It eliminates candidates with the lowest, looks on voters' cards for the next candidate that's been marked. Okay. And brings that next candidate into the tabulation process.
Okay. Now let's talk a little bit about poll workers. Explain to the community what is a poll worker. If you want to become a poll worker, what are they required to do as far as contacting your department?
Yeah, so poll workers are essentially volunteers, and they get paid a stipend though. So, I think it's $165 for a clerk and close to $200 for an inspector. Okay. To volunteer, which you get a stipend, so there's a payment involved. To be a poll worker, essentially people have to be eligible to be registered voters. They don't have to be a registered voter to be a clerk. They have to be eligible. They have to be a resident of California, be 18, and then not convicted or on parole for a felony, like I said before, for being registered. Now, to be an inspector, someone has to be registered to vote in California, so there's a bit of a difference there. Okay. To become a poll worker, it's rather straightforward. Our website, again, is a great starting point. We have an application online. People can fill it out and send it to the department. We'll contact those who fill out the application. They can also come down to City Hall at 10 a.m. every morning until 4 p.m. every afternoon. We have an intake room, so people can come, and we actually have them fill out the application, and then we talk about being a poll worker with those folks that come to City Hall. So it's rather straightforward. Okay, and let's give them that website again in case they want to be a poll worker, so they can do it online. So give them that website again that they can go and get an application online. So it's sfelections.org. Okay, sfelections.org. Right. That's where they can go. Right. Oh, so John, let's talk about the midterm elections. I know it's going to be real busy. What hours will voters be able to, say they want to come down here and they want to vote at City Hall, what hours will they be able to come down and cast their vote, their ballot? Starting October 9th. Okay. During the weekdays, they can come to City Hall from 8 o'clock in the morning until 5 p.m. in the afternoon. Then the 2 weekends before Election Day, which is November 6th, we're open from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m.
Okay.
Then on Election Day, we're open from 7 a.m. until 8 p.m.
Okay. Now in October, that's considered early voting. Is that what they call it?
Right.
Early voting?
Right.
So they can come in October on October the 9th, and they can actually start casting their ballot on that day.
Right.
And when does early voting end?
Essentially when the polls close on election.
Oh, on the election
Yeah,
day?
right.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, in order for them to be an early voter, do they have to be a registered voter to do that?
They don't. They can people can actually come to City Hall and register to vote and get a ballot in the same trip.
Okay.
So if someone's not registered to vote now, they can actually, or in October 9th, they come to City Hall, they can register to vote, and they can receive a ballot.
Okay.
And then if people have to change their registration, they can also change their registration and get a ballot that same trip. But no, but let me back up a little bit. But yes, you have to be a registered voter to vote, to get a ballot vote.
Right.
Right.
Okay, but getting back to your question, you can get registered and vote on the same day.
Right.
Okay, so we just want our audience to know, if you're not registered and you want to be registered to vote, and John, and we want you to vote because voting is important.
Right.
That you can come down to City Hall. You can get registered to vote on the same day that you vote, if that's what you choose to do.
Right.
But I think what you would like to do is encourage people to get registered as early as possible.
Yeah, they get more information that way. They get the voter information pamphlet mailed to them, and then they get also we'd send them information if they about their polling places, where their polling place, because people still like to get a ballot and go to their polling place and drop it off. Also about registration, so the formal registration period, which is when people don't have to come to City Hall and register, they can register online, or they can mail in, ends 15 days before every election. So so for this election it's October 22nd, but for now in California there's what's called conditional voter registration.
Okay.
So starting October 23rd through Election Day, people can come to City Hall and still register to vote and get a ballot.
Okay.
So the registration period doesn't close for an election. The only difference, you have to come to City Hall after October 22nd to register and get a ballot.
Okay. Now let's talk about once you voted, how are the ballots tabulated? Does your office tabulate the ballots, or does the Secretary of State tabulate them? Who actually tabulates the ballots? Once you get they voted, and they need to be tabulated. Is that what your office does, or does Secretary of State do that?
No, we tabulate the votes here at this office. So the votes that are cast at polling places are actually tabulated out at the polling places.
Okay.
And so voters actually can watch their ballots be tabulated.
Okay.
For those who vote by mail, those ballots come back to City Hall.
Okay.
There's a process where we have to review the information on the envelopes, return envelopes. We have to verify the signatures and compare those signatures on the envelopes to those that we have in our database. And then we have to pull the ballots from the envelopes, and then we tabulate. So there's a rather large involved process to tabulate the vote by mail ballots. But all counties tabulate their own votes, and then we do send the state results, the federal results, to the Secretary of State, who compiles them, and that's where you see like how a senator won in a contest, for instance.
Now, what happens if there's a vote where two candidates are running, and no one gets like 50.1% of the vote? Is it, because of the rank system, there's not like a runoff anymore? Is that correct?
For local offices.
Okay.
Yeah, I should clarify. So all the state and federal offices, still whoever gets the most votes wins.
Okay.
With ranked choice voting for most local candidates, except for school board, like Board of Education and Community College Board, all local offices have the ranked choice voting method applied to them. So if for those local contests that use the ranked choice method, if there's no majority winner, then that's when the ranked choice method is applied. That's when it's an elimination of candidates, the transfer of votes, the retabulation. That's when that all begins. With ranked choice voting, the majority of all votes cast is not what's required for a candidate to win.
Okay.
It's a majority of votes cast.
Okay.
Because as candidates are being eliminated, and ballot cards essentially are what's called exhausted, because if you vote for 3 people and there's 5 people in a contest, at some point you may not have picked any of those 5, the remaining 2 people. There's only 3 choices you have on your ballot card. So with ranked choice voting, it's the majority of votes remaining.
Okay.
And that's how someone would win one of those contests.
Okay. And one of the things I would like for you to touch on, you know, doing, I think it was when President George Bush and Al Gore was running, we learned about provisional voting.
Mm-hmm.
Prior to that time, we didn't even know what a provisional vote is. Could you kind of like succinctly tell the voters what is provisional voting, and because a lot of people still don't understand what is provisional voting.
So provisional voting, all it is someone goes to a polling place and their name's not in the roster.
Okay.
Because at every polling place, there's a list of voters for that polling place, for that precinct. It's called the roster of voters. So if I go to a polling place other than where I live, then I will not be on that list of that roster of voters.
Okay.
And so what happens is poll workers will give the voters a ballot, but they also give the voters an envelope.
Okay.
It's called a provisional envelope.
Okay.
And so once the voters mark the cards, they'll put their ballot cards into that envelope. An envelope goes into the ballot box at the polling place. It's not tabulated.
Mm-hmm.
It goes into the envelope, it's put into a ballot box. And then those provisional ballots are brought back to City Hall.
Okay.
And just like with the vote by mail ballots, we have to look at the envelope and look at the information that's written on the envelope.
Okay.
We compare that information to what's in our database.
Okay.
Then we also look at the signatures. And so every voter has a signature sample in our database. So we look at the signatures on those provisional envelopes, and we compare them to signatures in our database.
Okay.
So if everything lines up, then we can count those ballots.
Okay.
But the thing with provisional ballots is, depending where you live, you have different contests on your ballot versus another part of the city. So like I live in District 4.
Okay.
So like for instance, the supervisor, there's a District 4 supervisor. So if I were to go to District 1, I wouldn't be eligible to vote on the District 1 supervisor.
Okay.
And so when the department looks at your provisional ballot, we have to do what's called a remake.
Okay.
We have to look at the votes that you cast on that District 1 ballot, for instance, then transfer them onto a District 4 ballot. In this case, there would be no District 1 supervisor that would apply to my vote. So even if I voted in District 1, it would not apply as my provisional vote.
Okay, and we're going to take about a 60-second public service announcement break, and then when we come back, we're going to conclude the interview with Mr. John Artntz, who is the Director of Voter and Elections in San Francisco. And we want to thank Ms. Hurst for being our guest, talking about voting. John, is there anything you would like to say to the audience about voting, to make sure they get out and vote, make sure they get registered? We want you also to know that if you are bilingual, they have information here for our citizens that are bilingual. They have people that work with people that are bilingual. So just because if you don't speak English, don't be afraid to come down, because they do have individuals that can interpret and stuff like that.
Oh, very good. Yeah, good point. Yeah, so there's many opportunities to vote in San Francisco, and there's a lot of information that's available. And I think the best thing for people to do is to first check out our website if they're able to.
Okay.
It's sfelections.org. There's a lot of information on our website about the entire elections process, voting, where to find polling places, how to vote, what the ranked choice voting method explains, how that ranked choice voting method applies your votes and then ultimately comes to a winner. And also the election results are on our website. So the most recent information on the election results will be on our website. So sfelections.org is a great source of information. And also give us a call. We have a phone bank of people, as Kevin just mentioned, that take calls during the election at 554-4375. We have people that pick up the phones in Chinese, Spanish, and Filipino, as well as English. We have a phone tree so we can transfer you to the correct person. And also we have a language line. So any language anyone speaks in San Francisco, we actually can access someone to provide service to those people if they don't speak English, Chinese, Spanish, or Filipino, by using this language line service. So we ask everyone, if you're uncertain, if you don't know, if you want to know, either go to our website or give us a call or come down to the department.
And John, what about those citizens that are hearing impaired? What do you have something where they can you have a phone system that you can talk with them on as well?
We do. We have what's called a TTY line.
Okay.
That I don't have that number off the top of my head.
Okay, that's fine.
We have that. It's on our website, the front page of our website. Also, if someone were to come to the department, we have, again, this language line where we can bring up someone on a monitor to provide American Sign Language to someone so we can communicate in that way and explain the elections process, how to register and how to vote.
Okay, and we want to let you know, early voting, October the 9th. Get started. Go and vote. It's very important to vote in this election. So we want to thank John Artntz, for the Director of Elections, for being our guest on this program. Thank him for providing us all this great information. Now it's up to you.
Yeah, very true.
Thank you very much,
Thanks, Kevin.
John.
Yeah.